Good people of YouTube, I'm the Watch Idiot, and it's time for another comparison that I've been thinking about quite a lot ever since I got both of these watches, and it's the Seiko Marinemaster 200 GMT with the Longines HydroConquest GMT over here. That's because they're diver GMTs. Instead of them being the more common GMT watches with a lot of water resistance, they are dive watches with a GMT function. And also because I am traveling, as you can see, things are a little bit different behind me. And yeah, what better time to look at two GMT watches, even though I'm in the same time zone, but that's beside the point. But anyway, in this video, I'm going to compare all the different elements of these watches, including the dial, case, bracelet movement, etc. And I'll award points for each of these categories. And then, yeah, we'll see if spending nearly double the money on a Longines will get you nearly double the watch compared to the Seiko. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about the outcome in the comments, since this is all very obviously subjective. So yeah, let's get into it. So first we have the dial and hands, obviously very critical parts of a watch, so it's worth 10 points. And the Seiko takes the first win with 8 points versus 6.5 points for the HydroConquest GMT. So starting with the Seiko, the dial has a matte black finish, but it's got a bit more refinement and texture than the standard matte black dial that you would find in most other watches, which leads it to looking a bit darker, which I like. And also it's got a 24-hour track on the chapter ring, which I also like a lot. And then of course we have all the dial furniture, and I enjoy the indices more here, especially with the split shield at the 12 that Seiko does, and then the classic and very handsome Seiko handset alongside the half polished and half brush finish that looks just fantastic in different lights. And I also happen to like the 430 date window because we get to have all 12 indices in full size. So yeah, I'm all for it. And then the HydroConquest GMT also has a good dial as well. It's well composed with the controversial 6 and 9 circle indices that I actually happen to like, but the indices themselves are just solid. And while I like the design of the hands and it's a very handsome classic dial, it doesn't necessarily blow me away. Oh, I am a fan though of the orange accents and the extra touch of orange on the 24-hour track around the edge. So yeah, good job on that end. But the main problem might not be a problem for other people, but I'm just not a fan of the matte finish that's over the sunburst dial. The Tudor Pelagos 39 does this as well, as far as I remember. And for me, if you're gonna do a sunburst finish, I want it to see the sunburst finish fully in all of its glory. And now on to the case and bezel, which is worth 10 points, and Seiko takes another win here with 9.5 points, and then the HydroConquest GMT comes in with a respectable 7.5 points. So right off the bat, I've said this in multiple videos about this watch, the Marinemaster 300 and the Steelmaster, but this case is one of my absolute all-time favorite cases. And the lugs have a very strong presence when viewed from the top on your wrist, and then the case from the side is just next level stuff because of the sweeping angled bevel on the top, and then also the brushed line that goes around the side, and also the tapered underside that leads to the case back, which makes for a very comfortable watch. As for the bezel, it's so helpful to have a fully graduated bezel, and also the click feel is classic Seiko, and it's just a more refined version of it. And now the HydroConquest GMT case is very solid, and the case sides are very well finished, and they have that spicy Omega style of brushing that I absolutely love seeing. Oh, and the bezel feels really good, and yeah, I mean, that's also to be expected for a $2,700 Swiss watch, I suppose. But other than that, the case and bezel are good looking, but quite nondescript, and the case is rather Rolexy. And yeah, whether that's a good or bad thing, that's entirely up to you. But you know, I would have liked it if it had a little bit more of Longines' character in the case, kind of like the last generation HydroConquest, except without the gigantically long lugs. And the bracelet is where the HydroConquest GMT claws back some big points, because out of 10 points, it scores 9, and the Seiko comes in at just 6 points, which isn't that great. And yeah, the bracelet is the star of the show for the HydroConquest GMT because it's got an H-link bracelet that has a 5mm taper, so it looks really, really good, and also it feels next level when it's on the wrist. And yeah, I'm glad that they did this instead of having a oyster style 3-link bracelet, because if that was the case, then the entire thing would have just looked a little bit too submarinary and generic. And then it's got that slim and refined quick adjust clasp, which is an absolute lifesaver for me. So yeah, not much to complain here other than I guess the 21mm lug width, but yeah, I really don't see myself swapping out the bracelet. So it's not too big of an issue on this watch. The Seiko, on the other hand, you might have noticed that most of the B-roll is on the rubber strap, but that's because the bracelet feels solid and it looks good. But just from the start, it was just pulling enough of my hairs to annoy me, despite my other Seiko bracelets not pulling my hairs. But even if it didn't pull hairs, that clasp has that stupid and useless for real life dive extension that extends the clasp, and it makes it sit weird on my wrist at least. Every single time I get one of these clasps on a Seiko, I swap it out for a different clasp. So yeah, not too much of an issue in that way, but also it's a really good thing that this looks so good on a rubber strap. So yeah, I mean, I would have probably put it on a rubber strap anyway. So in some ways, this section is somewhat subjective, despite what may think. And in this case, on paper, the Longines movement is the Longines movement, the L844, is better in every way, but there are things that I personally like much more on the Seiko movement, and for that reason, I give the Longines 8 points and the Seiko 7 points. And the main thing for me is the function, and I have long preferred the collar GMT function over the flyer GMT function for my particular use case. It could obviously be very different for you. For me, I stay on the East Coast a lot, and even right now I'm traveling, but I'm still in the same time zone. But I like to track other time zones, and the Seiko makes it much easier instead of having to reset the time every single time that I want to change that 24-hour hand. And yeah, that's not possible on any flyer GMT. And then there's changing the date. The Seiko has a quick change date. If it dies, just changing the date is like any other watch. But my God, changing the date on a flyer GMT has got to be one of the most irritating things in the watch world, because you have to go around the dial twice just to make it move one day. So let's say if it's the 15th and the watch died on the 1st, you're gonna wind that crown about 100 times, or if you're like me, I mean, you just don't wear the watch until you get closer to the 1st. And yeah, I know that there are folks that do this. So yeah, I just think that it kind of defeats the purpose of owning a watch that you paid money for, right? But even still, the HydroConquest GMT takes the win since it's very solidly accurate. It's gaining about 3 seconds a day for me, and the Seiko is performing okay for me. It's gaining about 7 seconds, but obviously your mileage can vary, which isn't great, but I take solace in the fact that it should be very reliable at the very least. And now on to the wrist feel, worth 10 points, because as great as a watch can be, if it doesn't feel good on the wrist, it's pretty much pointless. And yeah, both watches score a good 8.5 points here. Yeah, the Longines on the wrist, it feels like a very good Swiss dive watch that costs $2,700 and probably a bit more than that. And that's in the end what you would want from a watch like this. And it is super comfortable on the wrist. But one thing that I would say is that it would have been nice if it was just like a touch less top heavy. You know, it's not really a big problem in the end. I mean, I can still wear this all day with no problems. And then the Marinemaster 200 GMT on a rubber strap, or any strap for that matter, is super comfortable on the wrist, and on this FKM rubber strap, it's hard to fault it on the wrist, but it does drop points just because the bracelet doesn't feel as good. But once again, it's not really a deal breaker because yeah, it feels incredible on this and any strap, and I would have just worn it on this rubber strap anyway. And now on to value, worth 10 points, and this is obviously difficult to score because this section is very subjective, but score it I shall. And the HydroConquest GMT comes in at 9.5 points, and the Seiko comes in at 7.5 points. And the Longines only gets 9.5 points just because I have no idea what a 10-point value watch would be. I mean, getting a Swiss watch with this high level of a flyer GMT movement, a solid and well-finished case, a fantastically refined bracelet with a refined quick adjust clasp at this price point is amazing. And I'm sure that the price will go down a little bit more. So yeah, that just makes the value proposition even better. And yeah, nowadays some people will just give the Seiko a 1 immediately, but for me, at the price that people are paying for this watch, which is less than $1,500, you're getting a well-made watch head with a design that's very pure and very Seiko. And the movement can be regulated if yours isn't as accurate as you'd like. All my Seikos have been pretty good so far, but the big thing for me is that the movement is pretty reliable. And yeah, should they have a smaller guaranteed deviation? Absolutely. And should they step up their bracelet game too? Absolutely. I mean, I've been complaining about these things like from the start of this channel and beyond for that matter. But when I feel that awesome and unique looking case on my wrist and see all those awesome indices and hands and turn that really good feeling bezel, I'm happy. And that's all that matters in the end. Now Strapmonsterability for 5 points, and here it's basically no contest. The Seiko gets 4.5 points here, and the Longines could have been much, much higher, but it's getting 1 point. And that's because of that 21mm lug width. And yes, I know that there are more 21mm straps available than there were before, but it's still very limited, especially compared to 20 and 22mm straps. I mean, I could only find this FKM rubber strap here, and it only tapers 1mm, which for me is personally too chunky for this watch. And yeah, buying multiple straps just to try them out gets expensive and a hassle. And it's also kind of wasteful to have even more of the same 21mm lug strap when I have so many awesome 20mm straps. And the Seiko, on the other hand, has 20mm lug width and drilled lugs, so swapping straps is super easy, and since it's a black dial diver, it's pretty much gonna work with any strap out there, you know, short of like a dressy leather strap. And yeah, what more could I possibly ask for? And finally, it's the TWI Happy Index, which is just all about how it makes me feel, because I think nowadays too many people get way too caught up in the specs, in the numbers on paper, and forget that watches are meant to be worn on the wrist and enjoyed just because you want to enjoy it. So for that reason, the Seiko gets a 4 and the HydroConquest GMT gets 2.5. Like I've said before, the look and feel of the case is incredible, and also seeing that split shield 12 o'clock marker and also that really awesome handset with the half polish, half brush finish makes me a happy boy. And yeah, that's about as good as it gets for a relatively normal cased black dial dive watch. The HydroConquest GMT is a fantastic watch. There's no doubt about that. And when I see and feel it on my wrist, it's great and I respect it immensely, but it doesn't excite me when it's next to the Marinemaster 200 GMT or some of my other divers. So like I said in the last comparison with it, if this was my only diver or GMT or like one of a few, then this would have gotten like many, many more points on this end, just because, yeah, like I've said before, incredible watch. And now it is time for the final score, and it's 55 points out of 70 for the Marinemaster 200 GMT, and the Longines gets 52.5 points out of the 70 points. So yeah, pretty close all things considered, and I think it is pretty fair just because the Marinemaster 200 lost points on the bracelet big time, and then the Longines lost points on the technicalities in a way, just because if it had a 20mm lug width, it would have won in terms of points outright. And that's obviously despite the fact that I am going to be keeping it on the bracelet anyway. And also the movement would have gotten more points if changing the date wasn't just so unbelievably irritating for me. And just for context, the Longines Spirit Zultime 39 got 56.5 points, which is obviously more than both of these watches. And yeah, none of these watches really ran away with the points. There was some sort of loss taken for each one. So it really just depends on what your priorities are for a watch that you'd be spending actual money on. And yeah, for me, the Seiko just offers a special experience, but the Longines, like I've said so many times before, is just such a intensely value-packed watch. So there you have it. Let me know what you think down in the comments about the final score and what you would have scored differently, because I know that there will be many fired up opinions about this. So yeah, go ahead, hit the like button and subscribe button if you enjoyed this video and want more. And yeah, until the next video, good day.